panel discussion with our distinguished guests here who I'll introduce. We first have Jim Corcoran, Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce President, and he's the current WMATA board member, so that would be interesting to be able to talk about issues with WMATA. Next, we have Bridget Newton. She's a former chair of the MWCOG. And on my left, we have Bill Hanvey, he's president of the Auto Care Association. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm just going to open up the discussion with the president's infrastructure plan because you're local, but it's going to impact everybody. So if I could just move down the list here and see what your initial thoughts are, feasibility, the cost, and what you think it could produce for you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I won't get into the cost so much, but the feasibility of it. I think everybody out there is aware that we have major infrastructure issues. We've been talking about a major infrastructure bill for a decade or more. So the time is right to get a major infrastructure bill. I also think one of the things that I love about the proposal that I'm seeing, and by the way, I am not a federal expert, is that a lot of this money, about 70% of it, is actually going to be used in combination with other local, regional, and state monies to get things done. And that creates an impetus for getting things done on a regional level. I can talk to Virginia about what they're doing right now, but gosh, back in 2013, we came up with another $1 billion with our HB 20313. That money, you're seeing it put to work right now. You're seeing it with intersections, highways, and things that are going, but also with some of the private funds that we have. And that's really a model for what has to happen across the country.
Thank you, and just one slight correction. I'm the former chair of the Transportation Planning Board of COG, not the COG board, just a small little tweak there. And as the mayor of the city of Rockville, I'm going to focus on the local level. I'm thrilled to see an infrastructure bill come out. I think it's a starting point. There are a lot of things we need to do in this area, and the partnerships are what is going to get it done. For Metro, I'm pleased to see the money coming in, but we need more. And thank you very much for putting the far northern stops on the red line back in service, so we appreciate that.
What?
There was a turnaround, just for those of you who don't know, there was a turnaround of every other train at Grosvenor, and according to the recent negotiations, they're going to come back in for every train to go north, and that we have 4 stops on the red line that come past Grosvenor, and we need that help there too, so thank you.
No, I will tell you it's under consideration. I won't say that it has been passed.
I thought I heard it pass.
Ah.
Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Bill Hanvey. I'm the president and CEO of the Auto Care Association. So we represent the independent repair community all the way from the Tier 1 parts manufacturers to distributors such as AutoZone or O'Reilly or Advance, all the way down to your local shop on the corner of Elm and Main. And the way that we view infrastructure from a national level is that it's connectivity. So it's not just concrete and steel or bridges and roads, but it's your ability to be able to look to the future in terms of what transportation brings, and that's connectivity. So in your particular city or district, it's in the future, it's the car being able to connect to the stoplight, to the ambulance, to the train, to the ship that's unloading the materials in the port. So we look at it as connectivity, and we think it's very important for the consumer to be able to dictate where their vehicle's data goes so that we're able to be standardized and have that connectivity. So that's what we're focusing on.
Mm-hmm. What's your initial thought on the Trump's infrastructure plan and how that would impact drivers?
Well, our thought is that we obviously support it. So, you know, as the Auto Care Association, we promote vehicle safety, and a safe road or a safe bridge and a safe infrastructure ties into our exact messaging in terms of safety. We think that, you know, Eisenhower 70 years ago when he developed the highway plan, we have to have the same vision with this bill that Eisenhower did some 70 years ago to look into the future in terms of what transportation can be. So we want to make sure that that's included.
Do you have any thoughts on the fact that this infrastructure plan may involve some kind of user fee for drivers, either a toll or, we didn't get into this in the last discussion, but road pricing. taxing people per mile or pricing them out per mile?
So currently, right now, the gas tax is about 18.4 cents on a federal level. And that was, I checked your facts, but I believe it was 1993 that the last time that was changed. So what's happened since that time is that engines have become so much more efficient that it's a law of diminishing return in terms of the revenue that gas tax is driving. So we have to look at all different areas in terms of whether it's tolling or whether it's user tax or miles tax, whatever the case might be. But I can see that it would be a combination thereof. So we have to look at all different types of revenue sources in order to be able to support
Do you
it.
have any thoughts on the tolling issue with the drivers in your area? Not too many tolls for commuters coming from your town, but in Virginia, we've got toll roads,
Yeah.
and they're pretty expensive.
So I'm going to take a different tact. I'm actually not in favor of toll roads. I do agree that we have to find another way to fund them. In the state of Maryland, they have raided our highway user fund, and so we are desperately trying to get that money back for local roads. And I think this year might be our lucky year. We've been working on it for 9 years, but there's got to be another way. It's really about the first and last mile. So yes, there are those communities that don't have access to transit, but we need to get people to the transit. I'm all for roads. In fact, I tried to have a conversation about a connecting bridge north of the American Legion Bridge that would help with transportation from the Frederick and Northern region across to Virginia and Virginia across to Maryland. But I personally think that toll roads have their place, but for commuters, I'm not so sure. And I think Virginia is an example of where it's being very challenging.
Do you have any thoughts on that, too? In Virginia, we get tolled quite a bit on some of these roads.
Yeah, but it goes back. I've dealt with tolls my entire life. I grew up in Philadelphia. I moved to New York. I'm now down here. When I got here, there was a toll on the Dulles Toll Road. Tolls create capacity. You couldn't get from Pennsylvania to New Jersey without paying a toll, or New York to New Jersey, right? And so let's get beyond ourselves in expecting that everything needs to be free. But when you look at what tolls have done for improving transportation capacity in Virginia, we wouldn't have that. Everybody would still be sitting on 95 north, and you'd be leaving your house at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to your office at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Now you have options. And I will tell you, I'm not going to pay $40 to go from Tyson's Corner down to D.C., but we're in the process of adapting to that, and I think what is happening is tolls do change behavior a little bit, but without capacity, we'll be stuck. And those tolls take a lot less money from consumers and travelers than do the money that's wasted in congestion.
You think we should consider more of a mileage fee as well for people because of the...
Yeah. The answer to that is yes, and
Yeah.
even the original gas taxes were our mileage fees, right? So whether you adapt those or, as you get to more electric cars, or how are you going to do that? That's going to take some innovation and legislation in order to get that done. But you do want to have people who are using the roads pay for the building and repair of the roads.
Would you approve of a driving fee per mile tax? California and Oregon have put this in place in some places.
Yes, and I definitely agree. Now with the better cars, more environmentally friendly cars, we do have to find another way, but I'm going to put my other hat on, and I feel for the people who moved out because that's where they could afford to live, and now we're charging them $40 or $50 to get back into work. And I think there has to be a balance here with what we as a region are saying is acceptable for people to move to, and then not providing the infrastructure to get them back. So I
what's
just
the
look at
answer
it
to
that way.
though? 'Cause the
Well,
problem
I
is
think
there
it's
isn't money.
choices.
Yeah.
I think it's choices. I think it's working together on providing the infrastructure. Personally, I think Metro should go all the way out, and we stopped at Shady Grove, not when I lived here, and I'm not from here either. But I think there are other things that we should be doing to get people to the transit so that they can take that in, and then I think that's a far more equitable way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the president's 2019 budget scales down Metro funding. It didn't eliminate it, as some people were fearing, but it's less than it's been in the past by about $30 million. The Trump administration has talked about the philosophy of the federal government being less involved, that the federal role needs to be lessened and reduced. That's from the president. and that the subsidies and their oversight should be curtailed. And I ask you what you think of this philosophy and the reduction in funding in the fiscal 19 budget.
Well, there certainly needs to be a partnership between the federal government and, in this case, the region, right? So the regional governments, and that has been. So the money that we're talking about is referred to as PREA funding, right? And that money has been coming in at the tune of $150 million over a 10-year period. And the 2019 budget proposal takes that to $120 million. That needs to be matched by the state still, so there's an escalator in there. However, if you want to take the optimistic outlook, the last time it was proposed, it was only $75 million. So they've gone from 75 to 120, as compared to 150 to 120. And Congresswoman Comstock and congressional delegation and Senate delegation from Maryland and Virginia really fought to get that back to the $150 million funding level for this past year. And so because it's coming out initially as 120, that's not set in stone at this point. And perhaps we may even give them reason to go to 200, right? If there were more, if you look at what the president is proposing now with having regional matching funds, right. If the states go through with what they're looking at right now for metro funding, Virginia and Maryland are considering it in their general assemblies, there might be cause to say this is a model that should be used across the United States with all this regional funding that is there to match what the federal government is doing for infrastructure.
What do you think of the idea of reforming the Metro Board, which is under discussion right now? Mm-hmm. and replace them with what? You know, that's the question. What happens? Who runs Metro then?
So I do that tongue-in-cheek as a Metro Board member, but the reforms are needed. There's no question about that. And our chamber is part of the Metro Now coalition, and we've been working with other organizations. But the reforms that are needed, there's no magic number to board members. I have often said that if you really want to change the Metro, get rid of the jurisdictional veto, and put the people there and put their hats on to really think about Metro and not think about the jurisdiction from which they came. Fix Metro, right? And things do get done or not get done because of that jurisdictional veto. And if you got rid of that, you would have 8 people voting on what's best for Metro, not for their jurisdictions.
Do you have any comments on the Metro Board reform issue, which I know affects your area too?
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree with Jim. We talked about this in the Transportation Planning Board about putting the regional hat on and taking your parochial hat away. And with the regional veto ability, you don't get past that. So I'm completely in support of that. And I think that's something that we all need to think about. I mean, government is there to do what the individual people cannot do for themselves. So there should be this partnership with the federal government. There should be this state, balance act. That's not the right word, but connection with the money. Nothing is free, and I agree with that. But I don't think that Metro is serving itself well right now with this constant back and forth. I do hope more money gets put in. We need to solve Metro's infrastructure problems once and for all, and then move forward. So I support you 100% on that one.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I know you do cars, but
right.
People drive to the Metro, though.
Right. Well, exactly. Well, again, it's all part of the infrastructure that we're talking about long term, and obviously we promote the safe use of a vehicle by the consumer, but we understand that mass transportation is part of an efficient infrastructure system. So we are working to make sure that that's integrated in terms of our long-term plan for an efficient infrastructure.
Does anyone here support the idea of a tax to support Metro? There are a few groups out there that are pushing a new tax, a regional tax, to help boost Metro funding. Does anybody support that?
Well, I was just going to say, a good Metro system supports all areas of the state, not just Northern Virginia, not just Montgomery and Prince George's County. It supports the rest of the state as well, and this is something that we've been talking about in MML in Maryland Municipal League, is the thought that just Montgomery and Prince George's counties should fund Maryland's portion of the fee for Metro. It's crazy because it allows, and yes, I do think there should be some way that the entire state contributes, because then it goes for the transportation options, whether they're transit or road, bridges or whatever, it should be for the whole state. I didn't mean to jump in on you, but.
No, no, no.
What about reforming the Metro's labor costs? There's discussions about contracting out some work, part-time work, ways to cut back, because their labor costs are higher than in other regions, and it's part of the problem with the cost right now. Do you think that that's a viable option?
So certainly a viable option. You do need to look at those things, and you know, quite frankly, as Bill was saying before, when you start talking about driverless cars, what's that going to mean to not just cars, but buses and rail cars and so forth as you go down the road? Are those particular jobs needed 20 years into the future? I'm not smart enough to know that, so I'm not saying to get rid of those. With Metro, and if you go back to the Secretary LaHood report that came out late last year, the actual labor cost per hour of labor is really not an issue. What really becomes an issue is the cost per revenue mile for Metro. And we could, as a Metro system, we could never match what they do in New York. They just have such congestion, right? So many people riding the New York subway in Manhattan. But if you compare us to the Long Island Railroad, we compare more favorably to that. So really, there does need to be consideration of labor reforms, but the system cannot be fixed on the back of labor. But there are opportunities to look at, I'm going to say, innovative opportunities in order to lower those costs.
Do you guys deal with the automated car issue and what's coming down the pike for that?
We certainly do. We deal with it every day, and it's not 5-10 years out, but it is in the future. You know, it's our belief, and from all indications are, that it would be more on the long haul side, so on the trucking side.
Right.
So from coast to coast, convoying would primarily be the first usage of that. There's automated pizza delivery service in DuPont Circle, so it's you know, that the technology is there. So it's just a matter of being able to have the infrastructure in place to have that.
I think the Senate's working on legislation concerning driverless vehicles. What do you know about that, and how do you feel about them getting involved in it?
We're intimately involved in that, and there's a bill 1885, and it's a highly autonomous vehicle bill, and Senator Inhofe was kind enough to sponsor an amendment to that bill to ensure that various players within the transportation industry are involved. And you know, our focus is that your vehicle, if you have a newer vehicle, your vehicle transmits data to the car manufacturer every 30 seconds or so. And what we want to make sure is that your independent shop and you as a consumer have the choice to dictate securely, of course, cyber securely, as to where that data is going, who has access to that data, who is selling that data, and what data is available, and for you as a consumer to make the choice to have that data accessed by your local repair shop.
How soon do you think it would be before you can summon a driverless car and go somewhere where there just wouldn't be a need to own your own car and you could just call a driverless Uber to come pick you up?
Well, it depends upon the location, but in some cases, Pittsburgh, you know, they tried the autonomous taxi service, so it fundamentally it's there. So now it's a matter of, again, getting the infrastructure in place, and I would say within the next 10 years, 10 to 25 years, I think.
What kind of infrastructure do you need? Can't they just go on the roads and blend in with everybody else?
Well, it's interesting you said that, because we talked about the broadband.
Right.
So that's a necessary component of this in terms of having the broadband in place for all these vehicles and components that are transmitting data, to be able to do that efficiently and you know, to have that in place. So it's that's a key element of this whole thing.
Is there enough broadband? Isn't that always the question?
Not right now. Yeah, not right now. So that's something that we're focusing on, is working to ensure that we have, you know, our industry has that ability to utilize that particular spectrum to be able to have autonomous vehicles.
I mean, so much of car driving now is partly automated. Your car can park for you. Some cars, your car will stop for you in some versions. and when you back up, it tells you not to back up, and there's all these, it's kind of creeping up on you in some ways. Right?
Well, absolutely, and that they're semi-autonomous, and so you have the lane changing techniques, and we call it, there's vehicle-to-vehicle communication, there's vehicle-to infrastructure, such as, the components within your city. So certainly the elements are there in terms of, and it's in stages. So there's up to stage 5 is completely autonomous.
But then there's security issues too, because you'd be driving along, somebody could hack into your car, and how
Right.
real a threat is that? You see it in movies, but is it really something that can happen?
It's difficult to do, and the automakers have done a nice job in terms of securing their vehicles. But what we have to do is, we are of the opinion that should be a standardized data system so that it can be accessed securely and not accessed non-securely. So it can't be hacked, but for those that are qualified and those that have licenses to be able to go in, or they would be able to access.
But
that
everything
data.
can be hacked, right? Because an 18-year-old can figure out how to hack
Well,
into
and that's, and
the
that's
CIA, right?
sure, and that is the challenge in terms of building a system that can't be hacked, secure cyber wall, and then being able to get back in securely is really the key in this whole thing. So it's absolutely a concern, and that's something that we're working on every day.
Yeah, it's really part of the infrastructure bill, too.
Absolutely, Jim.
We need to do this. Today, you can drive across the country in a driverless car. It's being done.
Yep.
Well, the Teslas are partly driverless, but you have to be in the car and controlling things and paying attention, right?
So they say, right? What is,
Right.
is it? Do you really need to be in there, or is it
Right,
just that
right.
you don't want to see a car next to you with nobody driving it? But the car can be driven. It's the cities don't have the infrastructure on the roads
That's right.
today to tell folks where to go, but on the highway system, there's a lot of testing being done. Certainly in Michigan, I will tell you, in Fairfax County is a test lab for driverless vehicles, and Virginia Tech is doing a lot of work on that. So there's tremendous work, and it's not going to be 20 years before you see cars, without a driver at the steering wheel. It'll be before that, I think.